Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Ever feel like you're just stuck? Like no matter how hard you try, life just keeps getting weirder and more frustrating.
Yeah, like you're swimming against the current.
Exactly. Today we're diving into that feeling, exploring how contemporary fiction captures what it's like to be alive right now.
It's where the everyday collides with the unexpected. The hopes we have for a smooth career, fulfilling relationships, a sense of purpose.
All those things.
Yeah, they get tangled up in the, well, bizarre realities of being alive in the 21st century.
Totally. And if you're interested in exploring these ideas, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. We've got more deep dives coming your way. Today, we're focusing on Counterattacks at 30 by Won-pyung Sohn. There's a link to buy it on Amazon in the description. This book, well, it's not your typical feel-good story.
It's more like a punch in the gut.
Maybe not a punch, but it's definitely sharp. It's a witty and deeply moving look at a woman in her 30s in Seoul. She's dealing with these crazy workplace situations, relationships that are anything but straightforward, and, just trying to find meaning in a world that often feels rigged.
Yeah, a world that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right. It's full of surprises, relatable struggles, moments that'll make you think, and maybe even laugh.
Dark humor, for sure.
Absolutely. So let's get started. And what better place to begin than with the protagonist's very first challenge, before she was even born, her name.
Yeah, that's a wild start. The mother's utter despair when she hears the name her husband picked.
Chubong.
Bong. I mean, come on.
It immediately shows you how much weight a name carries in Korean society and how much anxiety it can cause.
It really makes you wonder about those hidden cultural pressures, the ones that shape who we are. And then the father tries to make it sound better, which honestly is hilarious.
Yeah, that's pure comedy.
He compares it to Jinbong, which is even worse. Right, like that's supposed to be comforting.
And then the double meaning.
Oh, with Kochubong.
Yeah, pepper and, well, something else entirely.
It's like adding insult to injury. You can almost feel the mother's lifelong dream to give her child a beautiful name just crumbling. Especially because her own name was so ordinary.
Bae Malsuk. Yeah, not exactly poetic. And it shows how much cultural meaning can be attached to a name, something we might take for granted.
Totally. A name in Korea, it's not just a name. It ties into history, family, social standing.
Yeah.
The mother wants something beautiful, maybe a sign of a brighter future for her child.
And then things get even more intense. She prays for a son just to avoid that name. And then the chaotic labor scene.
Oh, man, that scene.
And the father, he makes this completely inappropriate comment about Ben Johnson winning.
Talk about bad timing.
Like, can you be more oblivious? It's no wonder she slapped him, the first and last time, we're told. It just shows how disconnected they are in that crucial moment.
It's funny, but it's also telling about their relationship. He's focused on a sports event while she's giving birth.
Yeah.
Where are your priorities?
Exactly. And then the mother lays down the law. She'd rather die than name her child Chubong.
She's serious.
Dead serious. She demands a promise, a written memorandum, the whole 9 yards. It shows how determined she is, how much this means to her. And then, just before the C-section, the sign.
The birth of a daughter.
A daughter. Tears of relief. It's like a little victory, against this impending naming disaster.
The victory against Chubong.
It's a really human moment. It's
Yeah.
funny, it's emotional, and it sets the stage for Kim Ji-hae, our protagonist, who narrowly escaped that name.
Yeah, close call.
Fast forward 30 years, and Ji-hee's facing a whole different kind of disappointment.
The job market.
Oof, yeah.
Yeah.
She fails to get the job at DM Group, and then sees another Kim Ji-hae on the list of accepted applicants.
Ouch.
It's that feeling of being completely replaceable.
Like you're just a number.
She describes it as being an anonymous runner in a marathon, just trying not to fall behind. Lungs burning, surrounded by people, but utterly alone.
That's a pretty powerful image. It captures that anxiety so many of us feel, especially in today's job market.
It's like you're competing against everyone and no one at the same time. And she even compares herself to Ben Johnson and Carl Lewis, these giants of track and field.
And she feels like she's in a totally different race.
Yeah, one where reaching those big dreams feels impossible. But here's the thing, even with this setback, she puts on a brave face, a confident smile. It shows resilience, maybe a bit of exhaustion too, but she keeps going.
She has to.
Which brings us to her actual workplace. And oh boy, is it bizarre.
Buckle up.
We get introduced to team leader Yu, who's full of sarcastic remarks. She calls Jae-hee maladjusted and makes her stack chairs.
Stacking chairs!
Seriously, it's this perfect example of how power plays out in offices, having to look busy doing something pointless.
Just to avoid looking relaxed.
The absurdity of it all, it really makes you think about the unspoken rules of these environments and the resentment that builds up.
And the psychology behind it. Like, what does that do to a person doing these meaningless tasks?
It's dehumanizing. And then there's Team Leader Yu's claim to fame.
Well, what's that?
Apparently, she gave a presentation while in labor.
No way.
I know. It becomes this legendary story in the office, but Ji-hee has this sarcastic thought, like, how did someone so remarkable end up here?
That's a question we've probably all asked ourselves about our own jobs.
Right. It's like sometimes the things that get celebrated in a workplace have nothing to do with actual competence.
It's about appearances, not substance. And Ji-hee, despite her intelligence and hard work, is stuck with these menial tasks.
Exactly. And then we learn about DM Group's weird branding.
What's weird about it?
Well, it was originally called Diem, but there's this rumor about the founder having an inferiority complex about his education.
So he created the Diamond Academy.
Apparently. It's almost funny. This whole institution built on insecurity. It makes you think about how personal quirks can shape entire organizations.
The motivations behind things are often hidden. And in this case, maybe not so flattering.
And it's interesting how the academy is located in a former shantytown.
While the other subsidiaries are in Gangnam.
Yeah, Gangnam, the upscale district. It's like there's this aspirational facade, but the reality is a lot less glamorous.
Hiding the less desirable parts.
Yeah. And then there's Ji-hee's internship strategy.
Which was?
She thought the academy would be a backdoor to DM Group's headquarters, but she ends up stuck as an extended intern.
Stuck on a treadmill.
Working hard but going nowhere. So many people experience that lack of upward mobility despite their efforts. And it feeds into this bigger theme of disillusionment, especially with her encounter with Professor Park, who represents hypocrisy and forgotten histories.
Oh yeah, Professor Park.
She goes to return his phone and walks right into a public confrontation at a cafe. Accusations fly, not paying his assistant, plagiarism, even allegations of sexual misconduct with a minor.
That escalated quickly.
It's a laundry list of unethical behavior. And the thing is, he's still successful. He's a best-selling author, a popular lecturer.
Like nothing happened.
It's that thing where society forgets, or maybe chooses to ignore, the past transgressions of people with power, especially if they're charismatic. It makes you wonder how often this happens.
More often than we'd like to think, probably.
Ji-hee reflects on this. All those whispers and rumors that got swept under the rug, it's a reminder of how easily truths are buried, how problematic figures thrive.
It's unsettling.
And then Professor Park makes this awful comment. He says his lectures are as stable as rent in Gangnam.
Wow.
It's this blatant commodification of knowledge and a complete disregard for the harm he's caused. Like, he's untouchable.
It's infuriating.
All of this, the questionable ethics, the stalled careers, it really sets the scene for the mundane reality of intern life and the unexpected connections that Ji-hee starts to make.
Right, the internship grind.
Endless cycle of internships, extended intern status, the shady policy of making interns pay for free courses.
Exploitation disguised as opportunity.
It preys on young people desperate for a chance. And then there are those small details that show the pressure Ji-hee's under, the Mondayitis, her hiding her exhaustion behind glasses.
Relatable.
And team leader Yu's comments about her appearance, her so-called wasted youth, the scrutiny young professionals face, especially women.
The pressure to look a certain way, act a certain way.
It's sad that Ji-hee even agrees with her about her appearance. It shows how these external pressures get internalized.
They become part of you.
And then there's the chair thing.
The stacking chairs again?
It's more than that. For Ji-hee, it becomes a symbol of wasted time. That beam of sunlight, it's another day gone, no progress, no fulfillment.
A powerful image, like time slipping away.
She has this aversion to the setting sun. And then there's her awkward interaction with Gyuk about the chairs.
Yuk.
He notices these details that Ji-hee's too exhausted to even see. It's like he's on a different wavelength.
He forces her to actually look at these mundane tasks, to maybe find some meaning in them.
And then, out of nowhere, he suggests they took a ukulele class together.
A ukulele class.
I know, right? It's so random. Ji-hee's totally confused.
Who wouldn't be?
But she ends up agreeing. And her reason is hilarious. It's this fear of being exploited, but also missing out on some fantasy future.
Like with Hawaiian beaches and ukulele serenade?
Exactly. It's so self-aware and ridiculous. And this unexpected adventure leads to, well, some very uncomfortable self-introductions.
Oh, those.
Ji-hee remembers this disastrous time she lied about her age and job during swimming lessons
The good in.
to seem younger, more employed, but of course she gets caught immediately. It's that cringeworthy kind of comedy we've all experienced.
The things we do to avoid awkwardness only to make it worse.
And she ends up quitting the swimming lessons entirely. Then the ukulele class. We meet the oversharing soccer mom, the mom projecting her musical ambitions onto her son,
The classic stage mom.
and the mom on a spiritual quest through music.
Finding herself through the ukulele.
Then there's Ji-hee. She gives this super short, unenthusiastic introduction, like, can I go now?
Just trying to blend in.
And Yook, his reason for taking the class, it's free for employees.
Straight to the point.
The instructor deflates a little when he hears that, and then a little boy asks him to introduce himself. We get this glimpse into the instructor's fading musical dreams.
Everyone has a story, right? Disappointments, unrealized ambitions.
It's a poignant reminder. And then, surprisingly, this weird shared experience leads to some real friendships. And those late-night conversations, they get to the heart of things.
Part of what?
Of their frustrations, their sense of being wronged. It starts with Ji-hee being surprised by a welcoming message from Kyuk. A little hint of connection.
He's not as aloof as he seems.
And then they meet Yook's friends, Min, the screenwriter, and Mr. Nam. It's at this underground bar. A bit of a dive, but that's where the real conversations happen.
Away from the prying eyes.
Muin's dealing with writer's block, gossiping about celebrities, and his reason for learning the ukulele.
Let me guess, it's in his screenplay.
Bingo. It's like he's looking for inspiration anywhere he can find it.
Yeah.
And it shows the struggles of creative professionals.
Those initial dreams get sidelined by setbacks and disappointments.
Then Mr. Nam goes on this random tangent about autocorrect and language changing. He gets triggered by something Muin says about writing.
A pet peeve of his, maybe.
Definitely. He complains about primary school always being corrected to elementary school. It's funny, but it also speaks to how technology can erase our personal experiences.
It's like our memories are being edited.
When Ji-hee shares her own autocorrect nightmare, Jacques Derrida becoming jacket delivery,
That's a good one.
it's that absurd interference of technology in our lives. But then Mr. Nam says something that really resonates. He talks about how they've all been wronged in some way. It's like this unspoken bond between them.
A shared feeling of injustice.
And that feeling fuels their desire for action, even if it's misguided at first.
Right, like you suggesting a coup at work.
A coup? That's a bit extreme.
Maybe more like a prank.
But Ji-hee, the voice of reason, shuts it down. She points out the risks and the fact that the ukulele class actually benefits their boss, Dept, Head Kim.
Which is ironic.
They even go on this hilarious tangent about Dept, Head Kim's flatulence.
A way to deflect from the bigger problems.
Yeah, focusing on the small stuff when you feel powerless to change the big stuff. But they do eventually circle back to Dept, Head Kim,
The real villain.
the architect of the flawed intern system. They talk about how interns never get promoted, how their labor is exploited. It's a system designed to take advantage of them.
And they're all stuck in it.
Which brings us back to Gyuk and Ji-hee. Their connection deepens. He invites her for drinks, just the two of them.
Things are getting interesting.
It's this quiet, almost dreamlike evening at the bar. They listen to Body and Soul by Benny Goodman on repeat, the same song, over and over.
Setting the mood.
It creates this timeless, intimate atmosphere, and Ji-hee feels this unexpected attraction to Gyuk, even though he's not her type.
Opposites attract.
Maybe. She feels this tingling sensation when he touches her, and he keeps saying her name.
It's like he's drawing her in.
But then he does this thing. He compares her turbulent times to their grandparents' hardships during the war and Japanese occupation.
Trying to put things in perspective.
But it comes across as dismissive, like her problems don't matter as much.
Minimizing her experiences.
But he does redeem himself a bit. He talks about judging older generations and how anyone can become selfish in extreme situations.
He shows some self-awareness.
And then he asks her directly about confronting Professor Park.
Why she did it.
It shows his curiosity about her, but also their different approaches. He's analytical, cautious, she's driven by emotion, a need to act.
Two different philosophies.
And that tension plays out in their future counterattacks.
So, back to the confrontation.
He asks her this really hard question. What do you really want to do, Miss Ji-hee? It's a question she's been avoiding.
The big question.
Because the answer is she doesn't know. And there's this societal pressure to have it all figured out, especially in your
And you're
30s.
supposed to have a plan.
And she opens up to him about her dashed dreams, her unfulfilling job. It's a moment of vulnerability. And he seems to understand.
A connection forms.
But then Moon and Mr. Nam show up, and Ji-hee realizes Yuke's smile wasn't just for her, it burst that bubble of intimacy.
Back to reality.
And he downplays their conversation, calling it just talking about life. It minimizes what she shared.
A miscommunication.
But despite it all, they drunkenly agree to do this together.
This being...
Who knows?
Yeah.
It's the alcohol talking, but also their connection, however confusing it is. And this leads to their first acts of rebellion. It starts with Ji-hee remembering a time she skipped a collective mourning event.
During a national tragedy.
It wasn't about disrespect. She just needed a moment of solitude to connect with her own feelings.
A personal act of defiance.
She wanted that moment to be hers, nameless, private. And that desire to be different, to step outside the norms, it's what drives her to join Gyuk's shenanigans.
Shenanigans, huh?
Their first act, graffiti under an underpass near Hongdae.
A classic.
They even critique a famous artist's graffiti. They see it as an exercise of authority in a public space. It's like they're targeting a specific type of power.
They're not just vandalizing randomly, there's a message behind it.
Yoon's praised the character for non-existence over the artwork.
Erasing it.
And then he changes it to dance.
A shift from negativity to something more expressive.
It's about finding agency, meaning through creative action.
Even if it's rebellious.
Gyuk adds a mustache to the artist's portrait. It's playful defiance, mocking the artist's seriousness.
A touch of humor.
And then Mr. Nam points out that Myun's name means person who doesn't exist.
It's like their own invisibility is reflected in his name.
Their rebellions intertwine with their personal lives, their evolving values. We see this with Dabin.
The soccer mom.
She used to be against the establishment, but now she's obsessed with her son's English kindergarten level test. It's a commentary on societal pressure, the compromises people make.
Especially for their children.
She wants what's best for him, but also to avoid being judged by her community. The force of conformity is strong.
It overrides personal beliefs sometimes.
And then she drops a bomb on Ji-hee. Hano's back.
Her ex.
Ji-hee can't sleep that night. It brings back all these unresolved feelings.
The past resurfaces.
And then we visit Mr. Nam. Secrets and frustrations are revealed.
Starting with his living situation. Not ideal.
It shows the different realities within their group, and then we find out about his secret project.
What is it?
He gives online pornography lectures.
Wow. Yeah.
His justification. A man's got to make money. It speaks to the economic pressures people face, the things they do to survive.
The lengths we go to.
But then he tells his real story. He used to be a tteokbokki cook, but his recipe was stolen by Han Young-kil, who's now a congressman.
That's awful.
He regrets not confronting Han earlier. It's a story of betrayal, of feeling powerless, and Han's success is built on stolen work.
It echoes their own exploitation.
Gyok encourages Mr. Nam to confront Han. He frames it as a warning to other exploiters, and he does this dramatic thing with a corn chip.
A corn chip.
He picks one out of the bowl and says it represents Han being lucky enough to have been picked by us. It's theatrical, absurd, but it gives their actions meaning.
It elevates their personal grievance to something bigger.
And it leads to their first collective action. They visit a dying traditional market in Han's district. It's a symbol of broken promises.
The reality behind the political rhetoric.
They meet a kind but struggling noodle restaurant owner, and then they plan their prank, throwing eggs at Han. Mr. Nam's scared of retaliation.
Understandably.
But Gyuok dismisses the risks. He thinks Han's public position will protect him. Then Ji-hee's brother, Ju-won, arrives.
Bringing a whole new perspective.
He's worried she's studying again. He's skeptical of liberal arts education. He thinks practical knowledge about people is more important.
A clash of values.
Ji-hee tries to explain the value of liberal arts, but he's not convinced. He blames Steve Jobs for putting soul into a machine.
An interesting take.
He tells Ji-hee to stop turning your nose up at the world and wake up. He thinks his success as a salesman proves his point. They have different definitions of success.
Different paths.
And their views on their father's experiences, on how times have changed, it shows a generational gap. Their rebellions escalate. They go from pranks to counterattacks.
More targeted, more intense.
They want to make those who abuse their power feel uncomfortable, ashamed. They're taking calculated risks.
Testing the boundaries.
And they get this rush from brainstorming and executing their plans. It's empowering.
Taking control.
Their pranks get attention online. They're labeled as political performance art. And copycats emerge. It shows they're tapping into something bigger.
A shared sense of frustration.
But they want to stay under the radar, to expose individual wrongdoing without being exposed themselves.
The delicate balance.
And then Ji-hee has a moment of self-reflection. She's walking on a park track and realizes she's going against the flow of people.
A metaphor for her life.
She doesn't fit in. She's not following the conventional path. And the ukulele class ends its first semester, continuing into summer. The depressed mother's son is actually showing promise.
A glimmer of hope.
Then more departures and unspoken feelings. Depth. Head Kim resigns, or is fired. It's shrouded in mystery.
Corporate intrigue.
We learn he was demoted from headquarters because a competitor released an identical product.
Ouch.
He tried desperately to stay with the company, but ended up at the academy.
A fall from grace.
Team leader Yu's thrilled. She sees a chance for promotion.
Ambition takes over.
Dabin wishes Ji-hee will go all the way to the top.
Seems like a nice sentiment.
But it's deeper than that. We learn she lost her twin sister in a department store collapse.
Oh, wow.
It explains her desire for Ji-hee to achieve what her sister couldn't. And then there's the honeycomb pizza chicks.
What about them?
They're connected to Ji-hee's past relationship with Heno. They break up, and later they meet again. Neither of them wants to eat the chips anymore.
It symbolizes the end of that chapter.
They've both moved on. Ji-hee gets promoted to a regular employee, but Yuk's reaction is subdued.
Not impressed.
He says becoming a regular employee was never his goal. He's on a different path.
Maybe the path of the counterattacks.
More work piles up with Dept. Head Kim gone. Team leader Yu wants to use his salary to hire a star lecturer, someone who can bring in money.
The commercialization of the academy.
Ji-hee's uncomfortable with it, and she feels guilty about Kim's firing.
Wondering if their actions played a role.
Then the pursuit of fame. They try to recruit Kong Yun.
The talk show guest and author?
Ji-hee reads her self-help book and finds it generic, empty. She sees through Kong Yun's carefully crafted image.
The facade.
Ji-hee accidentally sends a critical email to Kong Yun.
Oh, no.
The wait for a reply is agonizing, but Kong Yun's rejection is surprisingly polite.
Taking the high road.
But this triggers a memory for Ji-hee. It's about another Ji-hee from her past, a complicated relationship.
Tell me more.
This other Ji-hee used her, treated her like an errand girl.
Taking advantage.
But she also showed kindness sometimes. It was confusing.
A mixed bag.
The nickname B stuck with Ji-hee. She felt like she was disappearing.
Losing her identity.
She eventually ended the friendship at Baskin-Robbins.
Ice cream and heartbreak.
And there was this unsettling visit to the other Ji-hee's grandmother in a rundown house.
Adding to the unease.
The other Ji-hee was manipulative, didn't want the friendship to end. Ji-hee went back to the neighborhood once, but it was a construction site.
Gone, like their friendship.
And she has this recurring nightmare about a glass elephant.
Fragile, easily broken.
It symbolizes her past trauma. And then she meets Kong Yun again, years later.
The other Ji-hee.
It's her! And Ji-hee immediately feels like a loser.
The old feelings resurface.
She secretly wishes for Kong Yun's class to fail. But of course, it's a success.
Adding to her frustration.
Then Yuk shows up at the bar. He's drunk, and maybe it confesses his feelings, or maybe it's a joke.
Hard to tell.
Ji-hee announces she's quitting her job, and Gyok whispers this cryptic advice: stop seeing Mr. Jong-jin.
Who's that?
It's a mystery. Ji-hee lets out this drunken wail, no tears, just pure frustration.
The weight of it all.
She looks at herself in the mirror and realizes she can't have fallen behind if she was never ahead.
A moment of clarity.
It's liberating. She rejects those external markers of success. It's her own path, her own pace.
Owning her journey.
And this empowers her to finally stand up to Kong Yun.
The showdown.
It starts with Kong Yun's coffee order. She's very specific, demanding.
A diva.
Ji-hee intentionally brings her the wrong coffee. She knows it'll set Kong Yun off.
Passive-aggressive, but effective.
Kong Yun flips out, threatens to report Ji-hee, and Ji-hee calmly says, "Go ahead, I have things to say too."
Standing her ground.
Kong Yun reports her immediately. Ji-hee gets taken off Kong Yun's class prep and given menial tasks. But then she gets her revenge. She misaligns Kong Yun's special chair, just slightly.
Petty, but satisfying.
Kong Yun confronts her publicly about the chair, and Ji-hee doesn't back down. She reveals Kong Yun's childhood nickname.
Exposing her past.
Kong Yun's mortified. She quits before the semester ends.
The tables have turned.
Team leader Yu's furious with Kong-yun.
The star lecturer is gone.
But there's an unintended consequence. Kong-yun's reputation is tarnished.
Actions have ripple effects.
And then a new beginning for Ji-hee. She gets an email about a job interview. It's for a company called Sloth, or Respite.
A carpentry company.
Yes. She meets Choi Jun-won, the CEO. It's a small, quaint office.
A different world.
The job posting was cryptic, something about Life Creativity Group. But Choi's vision is clear. He wants to create a friendly workplace for talented carpenters.
A supportive environment.
He explains the name Hugh, which means respite. He calls himself a romantic realist.
Interesting combination.
And he chose to interview Ji-hee because she called herself ordinary in her personal statement.
He sees value in the ordinary.
He liked her writing style, her direct questions. He sees extraordinariness even among ordinary people.
A refreshing perspective.
Ji-hee is excited. She feels that what-if feeling. Choi assures her there's plenty of work.
A sense of possibility.
She accepts the job. But she dreads telling team leader Yu. She feels guilty about applying for other jobs while still at the academy.
The ethical dilemma.
But she lost faith in the company after Kim's firing. The timing's never right to tell team leader Yu.
Awkward.
The final ukulele class arrives. The instructor's leaving for a new project.
Another departure.
They have a mini recital. Team leader Yu and other employees show up.
A bittersweet gathering.
Myun's performance is dramatic, theatrical.
As expected.
But it's the depressed mother's performance that gets the biggest applause. It's surprisingly good, emotional.
A transformation.
Ji-hee plays a song she learned from Yuk. It's simple, heartfelt. She realizes how much has changed.
Growth and reflection.
She hopes Yuk will be there, but he's not.
The missing piece.
The instructor suggests a moment of silence for him.
The strange tribute.
At the after-party, Myun makes a shocking announcement.
What is it?
He's giving up screenwriting. It turns out his screenplay was probably plagiarized by a DM Studios movie.
That's terrible.
He talks about how powerful DM is, how powerless he feels.
The crushing weight of the system.
Ji-hee tries to rally them to protest, but Myun's cynical. He doesn't believe it'll make a difference.
Disillusioned.
Ji-hee realizes she was part of the system that hurt Myun. She wants to be different. She argues that even small acts of resistance matter.
A change in mindset.
They decide to fight back. For real this time. They protest at the movie premiere. They wear rodent masks, hold a sign demanding an apology.
Taking a stand.
But it's brief, chaotic. It ends up as shaky cell phone footage on the news.
An anticlimax.
Myun's crushed. And then the news shows him giving an emotionless apology.
He was forced.
It's heartbreaking. They confront each other at the restaurant. Myun's angry, accuses Gyuk of having a privileged life.
The truth comes out.
He feels betrayed, resentful. Gyuk tries to defend himself, but it escalates. They